Good morning, intrepid frozen friends. Hey, Happy New Year, everybody. I'm so glad that you made it here today. I'm so glad that your car started today and everyone seems to be safe and warm. I do see a few people sitting with their coats on. It will be okay. You can take your coat off in here. It'll be fine. For everyone joining us online today, good for you. We're really glad you can join us in this way. We miss you and hope that you're having a great New Year as well. And we're beginning a brand new teaching series this morning, as you saw, called Chasing the Wind, which is a study in the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes. And I have been blown away, I guess maybe pleasantly surprised at how many people have approached me in the last week and that somehow they heard we're going to be teaching through Ecclesiastes, and they said, "That's my favorite book of the whole Bible." And I said, "Why?" Like super depressing. But of course, they were all men, and they're all super like cynical people. So of course they love Ecclesiastes. But anyway, you're going to see, I think, today, I think by the end of today, you're going to see, and over the next few weeks, I hope you'll see, it's not an overstatement to say that Ecclesiastes is a really unique book. There's nothing else quite like it in the Bible, and I think maybe even from the ancient world. I don't know of anything else quite like it, but it's also incredibly relevant. This could have been written just as easily in the last 20 years as it was 2.5 or 3 millennia ago. And in a study like this, if you've been around Faith Community Church for a while, the first week we dive into a new book, we've always got to take a whole bunch of time, and we're going to talk about the author and who he was writing to and when it was written and all just different kinds of stuff. It's your favorite week. It's the first week of a new series. So we're going to learn some Hebrew words together this morning. Who's excited about 2 Hebrew words? We might even have time for a Greek word, and we're going to talk about history. We're going to use big words like existentialism today. Aren't you glad your car started and you made it here today? Everybody online, stay, okay? Just one quick public service announcement too. If you want to dig a little deeper into this, the Bible Project has created a couple of really excellent videos on the books that we're going to be talking about here, and we're going to include a link to those videos on the landing page for this series. So I encourage you to go check those out if you want to dig a little bit deeper. But Ecclesiastes is one of 3 books of wisdom in the Bible. And we're going to begin here today because it is not immediately apparent why Ecclesiastes is even in the Bible. There are some who've read it and said, well, this was a mistake. How did this even make the cut? It's one of 3 wisdom books in the Bible. The other 2 are Proverbs and Job. Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job. There is a 4th wisdom book called the Song of Songs. It is also super unique. We're not going to talk much about it because Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job all kind of hang together. And the Bible is mostly a story. Okay, if you've read it, the Bible is mostly a story of God's good creation of the world and how it fell into sin and rebellion, and God's promise to redeem everything through a nation called Israel, and subsequently through Jesus, and then through the church. And in Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job, it feels like we kind of drop out of the story altogether for 3 books. Some have even wondered if Ecclesiastes believes in that story. I want to assure you he does, okay? While most of the Bible is telling this incredible story of God's redemption, these 3 books step out of the stream for a while, and they ask a whole new set of questions about, what does it mean to live a good and fulfilling life in the midst of this huge thing that God is doing? And each book offers a different perspective that we need to hear from, okay? So, the Bible Project, if you were to go to watch their videos, they depict the book of Proverbs as a young, vivacious, energetic teacher. She's optimistic and she's super smart. She has advice for you on everything, from how to run your business, to how to pick a spouse, to how to be a good friend, to how to live in your neighborhood. She is full of answers, and she's always optimistic because she says basically, look, fear God, do the right thing, and you'll be blessed. Who doesn't want a friend like that in their life? Proverbs is your friend, okay? Fear God and do the right thing, and you're going to be blessed. And if you're stupid and evil, things will generally go badly for you. So don't do that. And that's basically true. How many of you would like a good life? Who would like a nice, long, rich, fulfilling life with relationships that make sense, et cetera, et cetera? Every young person needs to be reading Proverbs all the time. She says, quote, keep my commandments. This is Lady Wisdom speaking. Keep my commandments, and length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you. But the lamp of the wicked will be snuffed out. Which would you like to be? There you go. Well, Job is one of the most righteous people who ever lived. He's done everything right, and terrible things happen to him. Just awful things. And he even quotes from the book of Proverbs from time to time. So just one example, in Job 21:7, he says, how often does the lamp of the wicked get snuffed out? Because I'm not seeing that in my life. And actually, I think I'm being treated pretty unfairly. And Job is another person that you want to keep real close. Job's your friend too. He's a mature, rugged, not a naive person. Job has been through the ringer, and he has come out the other side with this robust, mature, incredible faith. And then you have Ecclesiastes. And Ecclesiastes is not your friend. Okay? Ecclesiastes is someone you check in with 2 to 3 times a decade, but otherwise you leave him alone. And this is why. Let's just turn there right now. Okay, everybody turn to Ecclesiastes. You may not know where that is. Use your table of contents, okay? There's no shame in that. It's right near the center of your Bible. And we're going to be on page 553 if you want to borrow a Bible from under the chairs in front of you. Let's just meet Ecclesiastes real quick, and I'll tell you why you don't need to like him. He doesn't like you, so you don't need to like him. Let's just read the first 3 verses of this really unique book. Here's how it begins. Ecclesiastes 1:1. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. Everything is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? So Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to church. Some of your translations will say meaningless, meaningless. It's all meaningless. The primary voice in Ecclesiastes is called the preacher. Some of your translations will say the teacher. It's a really difficult title to interpret. And in Hebrew, his title is Kohelet. Kohelet. In Ecclesiastes is the only place this title is used. It refers to someone who gathers people together for teaching. But it is not teaching like Proverbs. And it's not preaching. I don't think preacher is probably the best word, because in our context, preacher is me. My job is to make you happy and give you the answers, right? To comfort and console you, okay? Kohelet does none of that. Kohelet does not give answers. Kohelet is a professor, and his approach is to ask questions. And what he does is he pushes you and pushes you and pushes you to ask better questions, and then to push you and push you to follow your answer to its logical conclusion. And he's always asking, well, why do you believe that? Why do you believe that? And have you taken your position to its logical conclusion? Why? Does anyone else have a friend in their life like this? No, because they're not your friend. That's why. I have a person in my life like this, and I don't like him. I don't enjoy spending time I like spending time with him, but we don't talk about anything real or serious because he's always pushing. And sometimes if you have someone like this in your life, sometimes you just want to say, could you just leave it alone? I don't want to think that hard about it. I don't have to have a reason for everything that I do. And if you have an answer, would you just tell me or leave me alone? And the professor is not your friend. And you need to think of Ecclesiastes like a 50 or 55-year-old kind of jaded professor who's wrestling with his faith because he has seen that sometimes life does not work as advertised. And the absurdity of life at times drives him to the brink of despair. There are actually a couple times in Ecclesiastes where he says, I hate my life. Now, he's brilliant, and he has seen a lot of things, and he's done a lot of things, and that's why he's so jaded. You know, he partied in his 20s, and he built a business empire in his 30s and his 40s, and he's served in government, and he's traveled the world, and he's sought out the wisdom of the sages, and he does not have time for silly, trite answers. He wants to know what is actually true. In chapter 12, just one more piece of introduction. If you just look over at chapter 12 real quick, this is the last paragraph of this whole thing. The narrator describes our experience with the preacher this way. He says, this is chapter 12. Oh, I lost the verse. Doesn't matter. It's there. He says, the words of the wise are like goads and like nails firmly fixed. What verse is it? Did you find it? 11. Thank you. You guys are so good. A goad is a sharp stick that you poke animals with. That's what reading Ecclesiastes is like, if you're doing it right. Okay, if you like Ecclesiastes, then you like getting poked with sticks. And there's something wrong with you, okay? The words of the wise are like goads. And then he says, like nails firmly fixed. In other words, there's no way around this. If you're going to live an honest life, sooner or later, everyone has to deal with the professor. Or you're lying to yourself. Okay? Let's begin. Our scripture reading today is just the whole first chapter of Ecclesiastes. We're going to start in verse 1 again. We're going to talk about the theme, the question the professor is asking, and then he writes a poem for us that we'll talk about. Here we go. Ecclesiastes 1:1 again. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. And all things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, this is new? It's already been in the ages before us. There's no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem. And I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and striving after wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this also is a striving after wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. This also is the word of the Lord. Thanks a lot, God. So, we've met the preacher in verse 1, and here's the theme for the whole book laid out for us in verse 2. Vanity of vanities, Everything is vanity. Some of your translations will say meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless. We'll cover this over and over again in this book. If you look at verses 12 and 14, he says, I've acquired great wisdom. I was king over Jerusalem. I've looked it all over. And this is my authoritative conclusion. It is all meaningless. And the word is the Hebrew word, and I don't always drag, languages in, but this is a really important word in Ecclesiastes, and you need to know it. It's hevel. Hevel, everything is hevel. And its basic meaning is that life is smoke or vapor. It's a breath or something like that. Psalm 144 says, Lord, what is humanity that you care for us, or the Son of Man that you think of us? We are a breath. We are hevel. When you go to your car today and you see your breath, that is your life. It is here today and gone tomorrow. It is hevel. He does not mean that there's no meaning in life. Smoke is a real thing, and clouds are a real thing, and the wind is a real thing. Sometimes beautiful and amazing and mysterious, but as soon as you try to grab it, it's gone. It's just not there. Hevel points us to the wonder and the beauty of life, and at the same time, it's fleeting absurdity. In Ecclesiastes, then, hevel means something like a beautiful absurdity or an enigma. It's just, you can't get your hands on it. The professor is saying there are irreconcilable absurdities in life, and it almost drives him over the edge. I was just talking with someone 15 minutes ago who was just talking about her son lives in Colorado, and his whole community was burned to ash recently. She said it looks like Sodom and Gomorrah. Totally gone, and like 12 hours after the fire comes through, they get a foot of snow. If God is sovereign, wise, and good, why wouldn't the order be reversed? Right? And that kind of absurdity just drives the professor crazy. And here's the question in verse 3. Here's the question for the whole book. What do we gain by all the toil with which we toil under the sun? Verse 18, he says, the more I saw, the more wisdom I gained, the more I experienced, and the more I reflected on life, the more nauseated I became with the whole thing. What do we gain by all of our toil under the sun? That word toil is a reference to everything we do. He's talking about our search for meaning. He's talking about our search for happiness and going to work and building our families and pursuing pleasure and getting an education and seeking justice. Everything, all human activity is summed up in this word, toil. And he chooses that word because there's a tremendous weariness to it, even in the good stuff. I hope you had a great vacation with your family this week. But the reality is, it is a ton of work to get there, and you rack up all kinds of bills, and there's the inevitable return home, where there are 350 emails waiting for you. And it is a weariness. Even the blessings. I was with my brother this week. We both have 3 kids. We've commented, we have been tired for 10 years. And we love the boys, okay? We love the kids. But it is all hevel. Verse 13, he says, it's an unhappy business that God has given to man. It's like chasing the wind. And what do we gain? Now, the word gain, all these opening words really matter because we're going to see them, for 6 weeks, okay? Word gain is a reference to what's left over. What do you profit? Some of your translations say profit. Like, what is the real permanent thing of value that's left after all of this running around? What do we have to show for all of our toil? That is a super irritating question. That is a super depressing question, and it pushes us to the roots of our belief, but it is the question. And if you don't answer it, the professor would say, you're just farting around. You are lying to yourself. And you're not living life as it is meant to be lived. Now, he gives us a poem in verses 4 through 11, he writes you a poem. Isn't that nice? Thank you, Professor, for this beautiful poem. And in it, you could title it Life Under the Sun. It's life under the sun is just a way of saying your mortal life. Okay, this one precious physical life that you've been given. Now, in the last 7 to 10 years, deconstruction has become all the rage, especially for millennials and Gen Z, although I've seen a lot of my older friends deconstructing as their kids deconstruct. Deconstruction is a word that describes the process of wrestling with your faith. We want this to be a place where you can wrestle with your faith. Job deconstructed. And on the other side of that wrestle was this rugged, robust, humble, beautiful faith. What is deconstructed in our world today is generally not a robust version of the Christian faith, but something that's pretty shallow. And because of that, it often leads to exiting the Christian faith altogether. Not usually to full-blown atheism, but to some kind of, culturally acceptable, relativistic universalism where Jesus, is a benign mascot for whatever the social issue of the day is. Well, Ecclesiastes loves to deconstruct things too. But what he's going to do is turn that razor of doubt around and apply it to doubt. And he's going to say, okay, in this poem, he's going to say, okay, so you want to make sense out of life without God. You want to live as though this life under the sun is all that there is? All right, let's talk about that. Or, this is much more common, I think, you want to live without this overarching story of God's redemption. Let's do that. Let's apply the same level of scrutiny to your new worldview as you applied to faith, and let's see what happens. And in this 3,000-year-old poem, he anticipates most of our modern objections. He's going to take all the things we would like to build our lives on, and for 10 chapters, he's going to knock them over one by one. Who's excited for this series? Isn't this going to be fun? Yeah. So here's what he says. He tackles, and I borrow these from Tim Keller. Okay, I'm not this smart. But he tackles humanism, hedonism, and existentialism. Oh, what a fun morning. Here's what he says. What do we gain by all the toil with which we toil under the sun? Well, the humanist would say, I'm here to make the world a better place. My life matters because when all is said and done, I'm going to leave this place better than when I found it. That was the answer of your great-grandparents, by the way. That was the answer of the Enlightenment, if you care about those things. Humanity is advancing, and we make our lives matter by contributing to the welfare of future generations. We hear this all the time at funerals. The world was enriched by his life. I'm a better person. The world is a better place because he was here, and therefore his life was not in vain. And the professor says, that is nonsense. That's just a lot of romantical fairy tale nonsense. A generation goes, he says. A generation comes. The earth don't care. The universe doesn't care about your life. You are nothing. Well, I don't need the universe to care. I'm going to live on in the hearts of those who loved me and knew me. Okay? How much do you know about your great-grandparents? I don't know their names. We were home on the farm this week. I got out an old photo album. I wanted to show the boys some pictures. I showed them their grandparents and my uncle and, my cousins. They don't know any of those people. They don't know anything about them. And I bet it's the same way with you. In Les Mis, there's this scene with a bunch of college students who are about to die on the barricade for justice and righteousness, and they begin to sing because it's Les Mis, and that's what they do the whole time. And they sing the song, will there be anyone to remember me when I fall? Could it be my death means nothing at all? Is my life just one more lie? And the professor says, yes, it is. Absolutely. And any other answer than that is a lie as well. Well, what if I do something really amazing? Like, what if I ruled the world? Or I'm part of some scientific breakthrough that leads to the betterment of millions of lives? Okay, absolutely. How many Chinese or Mongolian emperors can you name? Because they ruled empires bigger than Rome. How many people have even heard the name Wilberforce, the greatest abolitionist who ever lived? In 100 years, who will George Washington be to people? In 200 years, who will Martin Luther King Jr. be to people? How will he be remembered? Even if you participate in or do great things, no one knows who Caesar really was. No one really knows who Charlemagne was. Think about our own short history here in the United States and how it is being contested today. One generation's heroes are another generation's villains. Memories are erased. The sun rises, the professor says. The sun goes down. The wind blows from the north, it blows from the south, and round it goes. And if this life under the sun is all that there is, nothing matters. Nothing you do matters. Even if you could do some great thing, if you had the answer to end global warming, all you have done is provide a stay of execution of a few hundred years or a few thousand years. But if this life under the sun is all that there is, the planet is going to die. The solar system is going to collapse. It all goes back into the box. What has been is what will be. What has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. If you address one injustice, two more crop up in its place. The oppressed become the new oppressors. You do one good deed, here are four more that you've not gotten to. It's actually a law. It's a law. Entropy. The universe is winding down, and you cannot stop it. And nothing we do will matter. So the real question is not, what can we do to save the world for future generations? The question is this life under the sun all that there is? Because if it is, the only honest answer is nothing matters then. Not really. So the hedonist comes along and says, okay, life doesn't have any meaning. I'm going to live for the moment. So I'm going to squeeze all that I can out of this one vain life, and I'm going to face my oblivion with courage. I was accidentally created by the universe to become aware that I was an accident, and here's my revenge. I'm going to live with passion and purpose. And the professor would say, have you ever noticed that all streams run to the sea, but it never gets full, does it? And it's just like that with your life. The eye is never full of seeing. Like no one ever came back from an amazing vacation and said, oh, my eyes, I just never want to see another thing again as long as I live. The ear, it's never full of hearing. It's never enough. You never get full, do you? Once again, this is actually a law. In economics, they call it the law of diminishing returns. Your 10th trip to the Rockies is just never as amazing as your first. Your 6th lover is just never as amazing as the first. Your 10th steak is just never like and so on and so forth. You never get full. All things are a tremendous weariness. In verse 8, he says, I don't know about you, I have had a few moments in my life where it was like, oh yeah, yes, this is living. Anyone see our Christmas card this year? It's like this scene my wife captured of us in the living room. Oh, yes. And whoosh, it's gone. 3 minutes after that picture was taken, it's screaming and shouting and punching and you stole my toy and blah, blah. Shut up, kids. Hevel. It is all hevel. And it is vanishing. Look at verse 10 real quick. I just had this image in my mind. I just have to share it with you. But verse 10, I just had this picture in my mind of my wife opening the dryer for the umpteenth time that month to fold the clothes, and her saying, "Oh, well, this is new." Said no one ever in the history of the world. The dishes always have to be done. The kids always have to be fed. The bills always have to be. It just goes, life is this merry-go-round, and no one gets off till you die. And it just goes around and around, and we never get full. Well, the chapter ends then with the preacher reflecting on his journey, and he says two more interesting things. He says in verse 14, "I've seen everything that's done under the sun. It's all hevel. It's chasing after the wind." And then he adds this proverb in verse 15. He says, "What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted." And then he says, I've acquired more wisdom than anyone else who's ever ruled over Jerusalem, and I've had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. But then he adds, "I also applied my heart to know madness and folly. And this also was chasing after the wind." So in response to the inevitable meaninglessness of life, if you strip God out of the picture, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, there was this school of thought called Existentialism that came up. And we live completely in their world today. Existentialism essentially agrees with the professor's poem. They agree, okay, it doesn't mean anything. We came from nothing and we're headed to oblivion, and so it doesn't really matter. And your options then are to go crazy, which the professor almost does, or to create your own reality, your own meaning out of life. So, and you can Google this, okay? Existentialists will tell you they know this is made up and that it's a lie. But what else are you supposed to do if these are your options? Now, on a popular level, then, it began with creating your own truth. That was the 80s and 90s. And then it became follow your heart. Think of every Disney movie you have ever seen in your life. And what you feel that's the reality, is what you feel. And then it became create your own identity in the early 2000s. And now it's create your own gender, your own history, your own news, your own conspiracies, your own everything. And every individual is an island of meaning, inhabiting their own world. It's a disaster for relationships. It's been a disaster for children. It's a disaster for vulnerable people. It's a disaster for anyone in a position of leadership. It's a disaster for society as a whole. It's really bad. And of course, this also comes with creating your own religion. And if you're an American, you recruit Jesus to your self-discovery project, and you radically reinterpret what he says so that it's more palatable to you, and it is a lie. I'm not the one saying that. The existentialists will tell you, we made this up to cope. And it's all madness. But it's either this or you go crazy. And the professor is saying, actually, I tried that too. I tried out madness and folly. Folly in the wisdom literature is godlessness. He says, I gave it a go. Tried creating my own reality as well. And he says, what is crooked cannot be made straight. What is lacking cannot be counted. It's a poetic way of saying you cannot escape God's world. You can't get out of it. You can create new definitions of justice and injustice. You can create an identity for yourself. You can call good bad and bad good. You can enshrine it into law, and it does not matter. If God says something is crooked, then all of your rationalizations and accusations about God being unjust don't matter, because you know you're making it up. Everything that God does is good. And when, to the degree that our reality doesn't line up with his, the professor says, it's us. You can pretend something is real and try to count it up, but if God has not made it, you are chasing the wind. It would be better to tell the truth. And the truth is that in the United States of America, we are just making crap up now. And it's only adding to the absurdity of life. our confusion and this everything. So the professor is pushing and pushing and pushing us to say there's no middle ground about this. Oh, what if I do this? No. What if I do this? No. What if I just make it up? No. Either there's a God who created you and sustains you and is going to judge you, and there's an afterlife that actually matters, or life is meaningless and you cannot fix it. If your origin is meaningless and your destiny is meaningless, then have the courage to just say, my life means nothing. Or have the courage to say, there must be something other than life under the sun. Those are your options. Now, I am a preacher. And I do not want to leave you this way. I asked an elder this week, I said, should I just leave them hanging and tell them they have to come back next week? And he said, please don't do that. Okay, so fast forward 500 years. Here's the opening verse of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. At almost the same time in history that Ecclesiastes was being written, Greek philosophers were asking the same question. And they began using the word logos in a technical sense to describe the meaning of the universe. Logos is the word, it's the word word. In the beginning was the logos, and the logos was with God, and the logos was God. And the Greek philosophers began to say, this represents for us the reason for life, the meaning of the universe. And they said, if we could just figure out what the original design or intent of something is, then you discover its logos, and the absurdity just goes away. Like you cannot use a snowblower to clean your dishes, for example. How would that go? You would be using it against its logos. But if you can figure out what it's actually for, then all of the absurdity goes away. And for centuries, Greeks and Romans wrestled with this question, what is the meaning or the purpose of life? And by the time Jesus came along, they were in despair. They arrived at the same place Ecclesiastes did and that many people today have arrived at. There is no meaning. There is no logos to the universe. And that's why John begins the way he does. He says there is a logos. There is a meaning. But it is not just a truth, but a person. It's not just a principle or an axiom. But the logos of the universe is someone. And that someone is Jesus. And when you know him, when you conform your life to him, when you worship him, everything matters. Far from nothing ever meaning anything, everything means everything. Because he is seeing it all. He is taking it all up into himself because you are in him. So the laundry matters for the umpteenth time. The dishes matter, the bills matter, your company matters. Your life suddenly becomes of inestimable value because he shed his blood to have you. And everything matters now. And it will matter forever. Because he will matter forever. The preacher says, I have surveyed everything. I was king in Jerusalem, and this is my authoritative conclusion. Nothing matters. And Jesus says, I am king over Jerusalem. And I say it all matters. So whatever you do, whether it's mundane or wonderful or whatever, we do it for the glory of God because he is with us, he is watching, he is taking it all down. And that's incredible. Let me pray. I'm going to pray. This was my prayer for you this morning. I'm just going to read you Paul's prayer for the Ephesians. For this reason, Faith Community Church, because I've heard of your faith in the Lord Jesus and your love for all the saints, I give thanks for you. And I pray that the God of our Lord Jesus, the Father of glory, would give you the spirit of wisdom and revelation so that you would know him, and that you would have the eyes of your heart opened, and that you would know the hope to which he has called you, and the glorious inheritance of the saints that waits for you, and the immeasurable greatness of his power which is for you. Father, would you allow us to know that the power which raised Jesus from the dead is available to us and at work in us, and everything matters. Would you make us a community and people of tremendously durable hope? We ask this in Jesus' name. Everyone said, amen. Let's stand and sing.